Two talks ready, so you guys can decide which one you want. Talk number one is where I give you crap. And talk number two is where I assume you're not capable of following through on anything you say you're going to do. Which one would you like? Everyone who wants me to give you crap, put your hand up. Okay? And everyone who wants me to treat you like you're incapable of actually living up to a commitment, put your hand up. It's not much of a choice, is it? Well, I'm going to do both. I'm not going to treat you like you're not capable of living up to a commitment. And I'm not going to give you crap. But we need to talk about a reality. And the reality that we need to talk about is that we have to take responsibility for ourselves. I'll say that again. We have to take responsibility for ourselves. But none of us is in a position where we can judge anybody else, which is why I'm not going to give you crap. Because if I started talking to you guys about the fact that your number one priority as a Catholic needs to be participation in the Eucharist every week. Now, that doesn't mean that nothing else ever intrudes. It doesn't mean there isn't other things that you need to be concerned about. I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, your relationship with God is what's going to get you into heaven. But that's part of what participation in the Eucharist is. And unfortunately, we live in a society where you guys are getting the wrong message almost all the time. And I talked about that a little earlier when I was talking about people are afraid to claim their sorrow. Because society tells us that sorrow is bad, and so you should try to get rid of it. And happiness apparently is good, and you should try to get that no matter what it costs. But society also teaches you that you do not have to follow through on your commitments. You don't. You make a commitment to do something like, I don't know, go to school and get an education, and you find it hard, just change what you're doing. Or drop out and do something else. Or you meet somebody and you guys are kind of in love and you think each other's groovy, you decide to get married and then things get hard. That's okay. Just break up. Get divorced. Go your separate ways. You go and you get confirmed and you get sealed with the Holy Spirit and you enter into that commitment to try to be the best Catholic you can be. But you don't have to make it to church every Sunday. And you don't have to worry about helping out with your church. And don't worry about how much money you put in the collection plate, because other people can take care of that. But the fact is, there are commitments that we need to make. And I'll go back to that. Participation in the Eucharist on a weekly basis. And I had something happen once, not too long ago, that was actually cool. I could base an entire talk around that, but it was just a slip of my tongue. And I talked about the reenactment of the Eucharist. And luckily I have a core team that's on the ball, and later they went, "Oh, Dave, you know you said reenactment? It's not a reenactment." I said reenactment? Because Jesus didn't say, do this to reenact what I've done. He said, do this in memory of me. It's a remembrance. What happens at Passover dinner, what happens when the Jewish people actually get together at their Passover supper, we do every single week. Because the sacrifice that we are remembering is the one that Jesus made for us. But there's more to it, and I hate to lay the bad news on you. It's more to it than just showing up at a building once a week for an hour. Way more. You may have heard the term full, conscious, and active participation. If you've heard that before, do this. If you haven't heard that before, do this. Because if more of you are doing this than this, I won't be talking as long. And everyone suddenly starts going, yeah. Full, conscious, and active participation. Full means you participate. You don't just show up there to be in the pew. Now, there's a lot to be said for the ministry of presence. That means, you're part of the assembly. You're part of the congregation. But there is not a church on the planet that doesn't need help. Which means they don't have enough people fully participating. They have more of their membership showing up every week than they do fully, actively, and consciously participating. And how you choose to fully, consciously, and actively participate, it may be sitting in the pews. But it is entering into it with your heart, your mind, your body. It's not just sitting there. It's not just standing up and kneeling down at the right spots. Maybe your version of fully, actively, and consciously participating means you get involved in one of the ministries at the liturgy. Because if you have gifts, God gave them to you for a reason. So if you have the gift of proclaiming, that's what you're supposed to do. If you have a gift, a love for the Eucharist, if you know what it means to hold Jesus in your hand and be totally aware of exactly who you're cradling, then I'd suggest to you the Eucharistic minister is where you need to be, because you need to help impart that love of the Eucharist to other people. If you're a very welcoming and opening person and you're good at making other people feel like they belong, then the greeters and the ushers, that's where you should be. If you have the gift of deep and meaningful prayer, then maybe the ministry of presence is where you're supposed to be. But you have to explore those. But first thing you have to do is decide that this is something you're going to do. Because no matter what gifts you have, no matter what you've been blessed with, if you're not in a building, you can't share those with anybody, including God. And I'm not going to claim this for my own. There's a video on lifeteam.com, which is Father Jack, who's a pastor down at St. Timothy's, which is a big parish down in Arizona where Lifeteam started. And he's talking about people saying, I don't need a church for my relationship to God. I don't need to go to church once a week. I can find God in the mountains. I can find God in the ocean. I can find God in everyday life. And he called that exactly what it is, and that's bull. Because the question is, do you? I'm not going to put you on the spot, so everybody right now just look up at the ceiling for a minute so nobody's making eye contact with anyone else. Okay, the last time you were supposed to go to church and you didn't, did you spend an hour talking to God? Did you spend that hour that you weren't in church in prayer? Or did you spend it playing video games? Or hanging out with your friends? Or surfing places on the internet you probably shouldn't have been anyway? And when I say the last time, everybody that I know has missed Mass at least once in their life. And some of us a lot more than once. And not had a good reason for it. Okay, you can stop looking at the ceiling, you're going to get a crick in your neck. But the fact of the matter is, people use that as an excuse. I don't need a church. Well, you know what? It's not about what you need. That's not what this responsibility is about. Coming together in community to celebrate and remember the Eucharist is not about you. So it's not whether or not you need to be at Mass every week. It's whether or not Mass needs you there. I have been to some incredible Masses in my life that only involve 4 or 5 people, but not too many. Because we are creatures of community, and we need community. And if we're going to bring the prayers and the energy levels and the emotional content that we need to be able to fully and actively participate, we need other people there with us. And that's hard to get in a church even this size with 4 people. I have been at a Mass with 150 people that it felt like the Pope